November 2024. A Russian missile called Oreshnik struck Dnipro, Ukraine. President Putin appeared before journalists and declared that the world had just seen a new superweapon with no competition. Hypersonic, unstoppable, deadly accurate. But is that true? Or is it just a Russian myth meant to scare the West and intimidate its enemies? Welcome to the Beyond Borders channel. Here, we uncover hidden connections, power plays, and conflicts that shape our world. Today, we'll take a look at hypersonic weapons, which have become one of the biggest military topics in recent years. We'll cover what hypersonic weapons are, which systems Russia possesses, how other countries compare, and whether these weapons are truly as threatening as the Kremlin claims, or mainly serve as propaganda. And at the end, we'll talk about how many of these missiles Russia actually has, how many it can produce, and whether they could really change the course of the war. What does hypersonic mean? First, let's clarify its definition. Hypersonic speed exceeds Mach 5 or over 6,100 kilometers per hour. Here's where the main misunderstanding starts. Almost all ballistic missiles since the Cold War travel at hypersonic speed during their mid-course phase. Soviet-era missiles often exceeded Mach 10 while traveling through space. However, that doesn't make them hypersonic weapons in the modern sense. What we call a hypersonic weapon today is something a little different. Modern hypersonic systems can fly faster than Mach 5 and, more importantly, maneuver, change direction, altitude, and route during flight. And they usually fly lower than traditional ballistic missiles at altitudes between 20 and 70 kilometers. This allows them to avoid radars and anti-missile systems that are used to tracking ballistic trajectories. That's why hypersonic weapons are seen as revolutionary, not just for their speed, but for their agility and ability to confuse defenses. Avangard is Russia's most famous hypersonic weapon. Putin talked about this weapon back in 2018 and called it practically unstoppable. Avangard is a hypersonic glide vehicle that is launched into altitude by an intercontinental ballistic missile, UR-100N or Sarmat. After separation from the missile, it glides through the atmosphere at speeds up to Mach 20 over 24,000 kilometers per hour. Avangard can rapidly change direction and altitude while gliding, helping it evade missile defenses like the American ground-based mid-course defense and European Aegis Ashore systems. Avangard faces a key issue. Manufacturing the glider is extremely demanding. It must endure temperatures up to 2,000 degrees Celsius produced during glide flight through dense atmosphere. That's why Americans and Western analysts estimate that Russia currently has maybe only 6 to 12 of these gliders at most. Production is reportedly advancing at about 2 to 4 units per year. Avangard is a technological marvel, but currently not suited for mass deployment. Kinzhal is another Russian hypersonic star. Putin describes it as a weapon able to bypass any defense and strike targets up to 2,000 kilometers away. Kinzhal seems impressive as it's launched from a MiG-31 or Tu-22M3 and reportedly reaches Mach 10. But the reality is less dramatic. Kinzhal is essentially the airborne version of the Iskander ballistic missile. Yes, launched from an aircraft, it has greater range but still follows the same ballistic trajectory. Kinzhal doesn't fly low and doesn't maneuver like a hypersonic glide vehicle. And most importantly, Ukraine has already shot down several Kinzhal missiles with Western Patriot systems. That's a major hit to the reputation of this so-called unstoppable weapon. Experts estimate Russia produced dozens of Kinzhal missiles before the war and has likely lost much of its stockpiles since the invasion. Kinzhal missile production faces pressure from sanctions, as some components need foreign parts. The video isn't over. Please subscribe, like, or give a super thanks. That's a small financial gift you can use to support my work. Thank you very much. Let's continue. Zircon is a hypersonic anti-ship missile. The Russians claim that it can fly at speeds of Mach 8 to Mach 9, which means more than 10,000 kilometers per hour. Zircon is mainly designed to destroy ships, especially American aircraft carrier groups. The Russians have claimed several times that they have successfully tested Zircons from ships and submarines. Although Zircon is very fast, its actual range is more likely in the hundreds of kilometers rather than thousands. Some sources, such as a 2023 report by the United States Congressional Research Service, state that the range of the Zircon is approximately 400 to 1,000 kilometers. The British think tank International Institute for Strategic Studies similarly discusses this in its annual military balance, estimating a 1,000 kilometer range, but noting exact figures remain uncertain. Analysts at Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington say Russia may be exaggerating its claims about longer range, especially for ground attacks. It remains unclear how many of these missiles Russia has, as the Ministry of Defense only mentions successful tests and does not share serial production data. Several Western reports say that actual serial production is only starting up very slowly so far, and it is also questionable how reliably Zircon can hit fast-moving naval targets at hypersonic speed, since navigation systems under such conditions face enormous shocks and temperatures. And then comes the Oreshnik missile, which became the center of attention after the attack on Dnipro. Oreshnik is a medium-range ballistic missile, reportedly derived from the rocket system, 26 Rubej. It has a range of 5,000 to 5,500 kilometers, enough to reach most of Europe or Asian targets. Putin says the Oreshnik is a hypersonic weapon the West can't stop. The Oreshnik reportedly reaches hypersonic speeds, up to Mach 10. But here's the catch again. Oreshnik flies along a classic ballistic trajectory, which means it's fast but follows a predictable path. Yes, it can carry multiple independently guided warheads, known as MIRVs, which separate before impact. But it's not a hypersonic glide vehicle that can maneuver in the atmosphere and avoid radars. Interestingly, Putin has already announced Oreshnik is in serial production. He declared this in November 2024 at a press conference, where he said that this weapon is supposed to be a response to American air defense systems, and that Russia will start producing more units for its strategic forces. However, Western experts note serial production isn't always mass production. It may rather be a very limited quantity due to technological problems and high costs. Most importantly, Oreshnik is currently only available in experimental quantities. After the initial sharp attack on Ukraine, a second test came in February 2025, which ended with the missile exploding still on Russian territory. Experts believe Russia may have only a few Oreshnik pieces. Production is extremely expensive and complicated, especially due to sanctions and the lack of special materials. Are they truly impossible to shoot down? Now let's consider what may be the most important question. Can these hypersonic weapons really not be shot down? Russian propaganda relies on the belief that a hypersonic missile can't be stopped. But the war in Ukraine has shown that this isn't entirely true. In May 2023, a turning point occurred when Ukraine officially confirmed the downing of the first Kinzhal missile. This happened on the 4th. May 2023, when the Patriot system detected a ballistic trajectory over Kiev and destroyed the missile in the air. More cases followed. According to Ukrainian command, 6 Kinzhal missiles were shot down in May 2023 alone. In June, Ukrainians shot down 2 more. By January 1, 2024, Ukraine claimed it had shot down 9 Kinzhal missiles. The Pentagon also confirmed some shootdowns. Videos online show Kinzhal fragments, including its unique tail section. The shootdowns shocked Russian propaganda. Initially, Russians accused Ukrainians of lying, but facts proved otherwise. The shootdowns of the Kinzhal proved that hypersonic speed alone does not guarantee absolute invulnerability. The Kinzhal follows a ballistic path so Patriots can intercept it by calculating its trajectory. The real challenge would be a hypersonic glide vehicle like Avangard, which changes direction constantly and is much harder to hit. Similarly, the Ukrainians have also shot down several Iskander and Kaliber missiles, although those are not strictly hypersonic, but it shows that modern air defense can handle even very fast threats. However, everything depends on the number of missiles fired, whether the defense is not overwhelmed, and how well the radar network works. The Ukrainian experience shows that while modern Russian missiles are dangerous, they aren't invincible and can be destroyed. That's the crux of Russian propaganda. Because shooting down the supposedly unstoppable Kinzhal was not only a military, but also a political slap in the face for Putin. And what about other countries? Today, almost every military superpower is developing hypersonic weapons. The United States is developing multiple programs. For example, the ARRV program, which is supposed to be an air-launched hypersonic weapon. However, ARRV tests have produced mixed results, and the entire project may be canceled. Then there's the Conventional Prompt Strike project, a planned naval hypersonic missile for submarines and destroyers. However, it won't be deployed for several more years. The United States has not yet deployed a hypersonic weapon in its arsenal. They've invested billions, but results remain on paper or in testing. On the other hand, the Americans are also intensively developing defense systems against hypersonic threats, which is an equally important part of the whole game. China might be even more interesting in this regard. The Chinese Army officially unveiled the Dongfeng 17 hypersonic glide vehicle, launched by a ballistic missile, and gliding at speeds up to Mach 10. The Dongfeng 17 is mainly intended for attacks against American bases and ships in the Pacific. It has a shorter range than the Russian Avangard, but China claims they can make more of these glide vehicles. That would pose a real threat to American missile defense in the region. China is likely the world's second country with a functional hypersonic glide vehicle. North Korea says it's developing hypersonic weapons, but most of that is likely just propaganda. The Koreans have shown mock-ups of hypersonic warheads at military parades, but there is no evidence yet that they have hypersonic glide vehicle technology that actually works. India is developing hypersonic weapons, most notably the BrahMos 2, a planned hypersonic anti-ship missile. However, tests are still ongoing and the BrahMos is still far from being operational. So how is it then? Are Russian hypersonic weapons really an unstoppable superweapon that can turn the tide of war? Or is it just a Russian myth meant to intimidate? The truth is somewhere in the middle. The Russians have unique technology, especially Avangard, but only a few of these weapons exist. There may be up to a dozen Avangards, several dozen Kinzhal missiles, and just a few Zircons. Oreshnik is still more of an experiment than a mass-produced weapon. Although these weapons are fast and deadly, they are not invincible, as shown by the downing of Kinzhal missiles in Ukraine. Russia is also facing major production issues, lacking high-tech materials, electronics, and sensors. Sanctions have reduced their development and production. Experts from the West estimate that Russia is currently able to produce only a few Avangard or Zircon missiles per year, and maybe up to 20 Kinzhal missiles per year. Oreshnik is now produced individually and likely isn't fully refined yet. Conclusion: hypersonic weapons are technologically fascinating and present a real threat. For now, it doesn't significantly shift the balance of power, at least not today. So I ask, hypersonic missiles? Putin's superweapon, or just a Russian myth? The answer might be a bit of both. Thank you for your attention.